So I guess it's my turn to share. So this is my story on how I got to be over 500 pounds. I grew up in Collinsville, Illinois. It's a small suburb just outside of St. Louis and is a nice town. It's actually a really great place to grow up. It was an old mining community, and it was just full of lots of great memories for me, especially things like going to the library and stuff. I absolutely loved that stuff. But this isn't about where I grew up, but I am actually in Collinsville right now. I'm in my parents' backyard, so this was the house that I really grew up in through all of my real formative years, my teen years and stuff. Right over that way is one of the best sledding hills in Collinsville, and every winter we would wait for it to snow so we could all go flying down that hill. But it's not about me and my childhood necessarily. It's more so about how in my childhood it established some things that eventually led me to the weight that I got up to, which was 514 pounds. Now, I started out as a normal child. I did all of the typical things that children would do. I loved to be outside. I loved to create things and build things. I loved being imaginative and coming up with entire worlds that I could sort of consume myself in. And I also went to a school for pretty much my entire school life until I went off to college, so K4 through 12th grade. And I pretty much did that with all of the same people the entire time. So I have friends absolutely for life as far as I'm concerned that I went to school with for 14 years of my life, some of them. And it was a great thing though. But let's go back a little bit further than that. So, like I said, I was a normal child. I was born into a loving family with my mom and my dad and my older brother. And I grew up around this town and did all of the normal things that normal kids would do. And I ended up having a lot of fun as a kid. Nothing really bothered me. You know, I was just out there doing my own thing. So things continued on fairly normally for me throughout my early years. I continued to do all of the normal things that kids would do. I would play, I would ride my bike, I would just do all of these fun sort of things, especially outdoorsy kind of things, mainly just in the yard though. But everything kind of shifted one year, and this one summer, two major events happened in my life. The first major event that happened was Pepsi in the large cases went on sale and became absolutely dirt cheap. And two, I got into video games for the first time ever. And what it was is my dad ended up getting us a Nintendo, and my cousins came up for a while in the summer, and we ended up playing video games for hours and hours and hours and hours. And all the while there were giant cases of Pepsi just laying around in the basement where we were, and so we ended up drinking a lot of Pepsi along the way. And pretty much from one year to the next, I gained quite a bit of weight for a child. And I don't really have a lot of photos after that of me, because for some reason my school decided to stop doing school pictures at that time. But right there at the very end, that's when you can see that that's when I started to put on the weight. I continued to put on weight throughout the rest of those years, going into junior high and then finally starting out in high school. And it never bothered me. Like, I wasn't ashamed that I was fat. I never had like any sort of body image issues because, you know, I never did. And the weird thing for me is that I was bullied at school by a certain few people, but I was never bullied because I was fat. I was bullied because I was just a weird kid. I know I said I was normal, but I was definitely a weird kid, and I was an easy target for a lot of people. I took things very personally, and it was easy to get an emotional reaction out of me. And not to mention, I was a nerd. Like, I was a complete and total nerd. I never got sports or any of that kind of stuff, and so that was easy for them to come after me for. But that didn't really contribute to my eating because my eating had already been established well before really anybody started making fun of me in the first place. But what happened was, like that, with that one summer, I stopped doing things and I started eating and consuming a lot more. And because I started eating and consuming a lot more and not doing as much, my weight slowly crept up. And even into high school, it still kept slowly creeping up and creeping up and creeping up until I finally got to my graduation. Now, I'm going to show you some pictures here, some of which I am not exactly proud of. But Jessica insisted that I actually put these in the video. So here they are. Have your laugh now. Yes, that is a sword. Yes, that is a replica of Conan the Barbarian's sword. Don't ask me about it. I do still have it. I like that sword, and that's what I went with. So yeah, deal with it. I was a nerd. Leave me alone. But I go off and do some stuff at college. I ended up just going to community college for the first time, actually, because I went to college twice. The first time I just went up there and I was just trying to knock some stuff out. And once again, weight started slowly creeping up. And eventually, a bunch of stuff happened. I essentially spent a decade not really doing anything. And then I met this crazy Missouri girl who came into my life and completely changed me into a much better person as far as I am concerned. And yes, that is Jessica. If you were wondering, I'm not talking about somebody else. I am talking about Jessica. And she showed up and she was like, you aren't really doing anything with your life, so you're gonna have to do something. If you want to stay together, like, you got to do something. So I ended up going back to school and all of that and finally get into a career that I like. So after dating for a few years, we finally decided to get married, and this was really the second attempt in my life then to lose weight. The first one, it was just me really walking around a lot and trying to exercise a couple years before that, and I lost quite a bit of weight. I'm not entirely sure how much, but I did lose quite a bit of weight. Yes, the sun has just come out and it is glorious. So when we were approaching the wedding date, Jessica really got into losing weight, and you guys have seen that before. You've seen the photos. She lost a ton of weight back then. I lost a decent amount of weight. I was still very overweight though. And the thing was is that we didn't change anything though. We did all of the typical things that we knew we were supposed to do to lose weight. And then after we got married, we went back to eating the way that we were eating before. And that's when the weight slowly kept creeping up and creeping up and creeping up and creeping up until eventually 2 years ago I weighed myself and I was at 514 pounds. And I don't know what it was, but for some reason that stuck with me, and that's when I really decided to start losing the weight. Now, some of you guys may be wondering, well, Brian, you're not really talking about how you actually gained the weight. And really, how I gained the weight is pretty straightforward. It's like I said, I stopped doing things, I kept eating more, I wasn't doing anything to sort of exercise or anything of the sort, and I was just eating bad food. I was making a lot of food myself, but I was just eating a lot of bad food. But I'm not an emotional eater. I'm definitely the type to be a binge eater, but I am not an emotional eater. Whenever emotions actually come into play with me, my appetite goes away. So if I'm depressed, I don't want to eat. I literally have to get myself to eat something if I just want to keep going, but I don't feel like eating. The same thing goes for any other form of sadness. If there's some deep emotional trauma that I have, I don't want to eat. Now, I definitely am a social eater, that is for sure. Whenever I'm around groups of people, I do like to eat, but for me, I would call myself a bored eater most of the time. In that, if there's nothing going on, and I'm just sitting there, I get bored, and then I'm just like, well, I can eat something, because that's different. And so that's a lot of what I did. I did a lot of bored eating, and a lot of times I would eat maybe four or five times a day. Maybe not giant, huge meals. I've seen things where people have eaten, I've eaten 2 whole pizzas or something. Never did anything like that, but it was just a progression. And I slowly and surely just kept gaining weight and gaining weight. But the problem is that I don't actually know if 514 was my heaviest. I say it was my heaviest, and I think it was my heaviest, but I don't exactly know for sure, because a few months into losing weight, Jessica was going through some old photos, and she sent me a photo of old me that stopped me in my tracks. And it stopped me because I was in my office at work, and I just stared at the screen and I started crying in the middle of a work day, mind you, with other people around me. And this was the photo that Jessica sent me. This is what we lovingly refer to as the yellow shirt photo. Yes, I know I'm standing in front of a tank in that photo, and as some of you may have noticed throughout this, yes, I am wearing those exact clothes, well, with the exception of the t-shirt. The t-shirt is new. But the other shirt is absolutely the shirt that I was wearing in that photo, and I couldn't button that shirt in that photo. And it was a 5X. This shirt is a 5X, and I couldn't button it there. And so, I don't actually know if I weighed more than 514 pounds at one point. I probably did, but I have no idea what I actually weighed back then. And I look at that photo of me now, and even now it still stops me, because I'm just like, how? Why? Why did I do that? Why did I let myself get to that point where it was really impeding my ability to do things? Yeah, I could still get around, I could still walk, I could still do all of that stuff, but it really slowed me down, and it impeded all of the stuff that I wanted to do, you know, as far as getting out there into the world and actually doing things and being out there. And mind you, I was always proud of myself for who I was as a person, but when it came to the weight issue, I never cared. Even in college, I took classes on health and fitness and how to get healthy and how to do things. My father was the PE teacher and the track coach at my school, and he was always a fit guy. He was always out there exercising and doing that kind of stuff. And so this was all things that I knew. This was a bunch of science that I'd been taught, a bunch of things that I'd read, and I understood all of it. I just didn't care. I just didn't care. And that's how I ended up constantly overeating, constantly not doing anything to exercise in any way, shape, or form, sitting in my room playing video games. Yeah, I played music too and did all of that, but it just kept building and building and building and building until eventually I got to the point where I was sick and tired of it. And I just remember that, because the point where I actually got sick and tired of being the way that I was is the point where I was laying in bed next to Jessica, and I realized that I was going to die in a short period of time if I didn't change anything. And I couldn't leave her like that. I couldn't leave Jessica alone like that, because at the time, especially then, a lot of her anxiety was just constantly compounding and making things a lot worse. And I thought for sure that if I were to die young, then there was no chance of her surviving for a longer life after that either. And so I figured that for my own sake, for Jessica's sake, and for everyone else's sake that knew me, I needed to change everything. And so that's what we did. We ended up changing everything. We ended up losing a bunch of weight, over 200 pounds still for me. And I just felt that it was time for me to actually start talking about my life and my weight and how it affected me, because Jessica's talked about it a lot and how it's affected her emotional state and her anxiety and all of that. And so this is my turn. And so this is my life at 500 pounds. And I plan on doing a few more of these videos to explain different aspects of what it was like to actually be 500 pounds and living in this world. So hopefully you guys will stick with me, and hopefully you will enjoy those videos as well. You guys know the standard spiel after that. Subscribe, like, and share the video, find us on social media and all that. But this is me, just myself, and I will see you next time on Crocs in the Kitchen. Bye.